Personal finances are something that can get overwhelming really quickly, especially if you haven't thought too deeply about them before. So, for those of us who are sitting out on our own for the first time, we have to be very mindful and intentional about what we do when we actually hit payday. So, that's why today we're going to go over some of the best budgeting practice that I myself have found to be effective and what I do with my own personal finances every single month. So, keeping everything simple, let's talk money. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow student Michael Klukas, and on this show, we boil down complicated topics into simple and actionable tips. So, I also want to emphasize here that this is talking about personal finances from the perspective of just me as an individual, and I had written this up before I got married, so there will be actually a episode later on about combining finances and finances as a married couple. But that's not the subject of today. It's personal finance and managing that as an individual. Specifically as like a Gen Z young adult, someone who maybe learned some things here or there, but didn't have too much to go off of when they actually started out on their own. So let's set this up with some context here. So getting your priorities in order is key to getting your finances under control. So the first thing we have to talk about is safety nets. Now, 3 to 6 months of savings is a good goal to aim for. And for the most part, that is something that is not disputed really under any financial advice. Like, of course, you're going to have different ways of getting to it. So you have Dave Ramsey, who talks about getting like your first $1,000 to get some momentum going. You have Caleb Hammer, who thinks about getting past that and focusing more on that 3 to 6 months. You have Graham Stephan, who says really get nailed down at least at minimum 3 months. And if you are really conservative, get to 6 months. And then if you're extra anxious and want more security, get up to like a full year. But that is a pretty set piece of advice, is that no matter what, you want to have an emergency fund in place. So that way, if something happens, you're protected. If something happens, you know you'll be able to pay your bills on time and not go into the red. So that's why it's important, as that being the first foundational piece to get in place before you move on to the rest of the puzzle as well. The second thing to really understand and give yourself context on your financial life is, what do you earn before and after taxes? So this can also be considered your gross pay. So gross is what you make before taxes and retirement and fees, whatever else you'd be, whatever else would be taken away from your paycheck. And then net means what you get after that. And so you want to understand also how much of your money is being funneled into some of like the biggest buckets. And this is just to get you started out. There's more that you could dive into, but we're not going to get too deep into that right now. It's things like you want to make sure how much you earn before taxes, and then before insurance, and then before retirement. Taxes are going to be subject, and actually all these things are subject to fluctuation. So taxes is going to be your state and federal taxes, and those are going to be taken out of your paycheck before they ever hit your bank account. The health insurance, if you are still in your 20s, like early 20s, you might still be on your parents' life insurance or health insurance, and that in itself can alleviate some of what you'd be paying, but you might be choosing to actually have your own. And so then that gets deducted from your pay before it ever reaches you. And then retirement as well should be set up so that way it is taking money out of your paycheck again before it hits your bank account. And real quick here, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're enjoying us so far, make sure that you do leave us a like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you know every single time I upload a new video. It does help grow the channel, and I appreciate it so much. If you're listening to us on Spotify or a podcast app of choice, follow us. Leave us a 5-star rating so that way you'll know every time I upload a new episode, and you'll help share this show with people just like you. Let's jump right back in real quick. So the other thing here is that to give yourself context about your financial life and to set yourself up for success, you want to understand how much are you spending? And it's often more than we think. That is just the fact of the matter here, because these small little microtransactions really build themselves up to take a lot of our finances if we aren't careful. But you need to know how much money is going out just as much as you need to know how much money is coming in. Sounds pretty simple, and that's because it is, but the practice itself can be difficult to maintain. And so, you have to then think about the questions. Do you spend more than you make? So, are you living above your means? Are you going into credit card debt? Are you taking out of your savings to cover yourself? Or are you living below your means? I don't mean living like you're some 19th century pauper, but are you living at least decently below your means so that way you can save and invest your money for later? So comment down below. And actually, you can comment now on Spotify. So comment down below on YouTube or Spotify. Do you know how much you spend every single month? I'm curious to see what your guys' guesses are. But that leads us into the next segment of the show here, simple questions. And these are the three simple questions that I would ask myself when thinking about my finances for a month, and I encourage you guys to also think about as well. And this is what really has just worked for me in managing and understanding how to better control my money. So the first thing is that, is there something I'm saving for within this next month or the next 2 to 3 months? You want to increase your time horizon in which you are thinking about like these rewards or these big purchases, because that's going to make it actually a lot more attainable. It's just going to mean that you're going to have to wait a little bit longer before you actually get it. The best example I have of this is a Nintendo Switch, where I wanted that thing for months, where I kind of just muled over it. I was like, okay, I'm saving up for it. It's not that much overall based on what I was earning, but it felt like a big purchase at the time. And for me, it was one of the biggest purchases I've made in a long time. But I was saving up for it over time. And ultimately, because of that, it wasn't that much of like a hit to any of my personal finances, because I had distinctly put away money for a Nintendo Switch over the period of about 3 to 4 months. And the reason why you want to ask yourself, what are you saving for within a certain time frame, is that it's so much easier for us to stay on track when we know that there is a reward coming, that we're going to be able to say, okay, that's made it worth it. I was saving up, I reached the goal, because usually the anticipation of the goal itself can be more rewarding than actually making that final big purchase. So that's the first question. Then you need to ask yourself, what can be automated so that I never miss a payment? Now, we're not getting into credit cards at the current moment, but this is things like your rent. Are you on auto pay for that? If you have a car loan, are you on auto pay for that? Your bills, so utilities, water, internet, all the monthly expenses that are going to be reoccurring no matter what, are you setting it up to be paid automatically? And this is because as humans, we are by no means perfect. And our minds in themselves should not be used to house a bunch of to-dos and, oh, I need to do this task and I need to make sure that I follow up on this email. And no, just don't do that. Our minds are much better for crafting ideas, not so much for holding them. So if you can automate it, save yourself the headache. Just get it automated, because that is going to make it so much simpler in your own life, because you know that it will be paid. You know that what you are going to have taken care of every single month is off your plate. So that's one less thing for you to worry about and one less thing for you to stress about, because money is stressful. You don't need to add more to it. And then the other question is, how can I leave room to still enjoy the things I want to do? And this is going to look different for everybody. Some people really want to go out every single night with their friends. Some people really want to save up for experiences. Maybe they want to take a weekend trip every single month, or some people want to go to the movies once a week. Whatever it is, you have to make sure that you're still leaving some room, if you can anyways, to really put towards your enjoyment and actually using the money you've earned. Because when I say living below your means, that looks different for everybody. Because when I had gotten one of my first jobs out of college, I was living with 3 roommates. So 4 guys crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment, and I'm working 48 hours a week, if not 45. And I'm making a pretty good income at that time because my expenses were so low. So me choosing to go out to the movies and go out to eat, that worked in pretty well into my finances because of keeping my expenses and my overhead low. However, some people won't be earning that much, or they'll have a different situation where maybe they are in a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment on their own for the first time, and they are stretching their dollar kind of far, and they don't have as much wiggle room to go out and have fun. In those instances, I don't want to say that it's impossible, but you do have to be intentional about maybe picking up from that first question of, is there a way I can save with this month or the next 2 to 3 months, and just kind of kick the can forward a little bit more. So if you want to go on a weekend trip every single month, but you can't afford it, then maybe what you end up doing is you end up saving for a month or 2 to be able to afford that trip in month 3. It's just about changing the timeline, but still understanding your own context and your own situation, because you don't want to overspend just so that way you can have some experience now when you can't pay for it and actually cover it in the present moment. And ultimately, I say this because I want you to enjoy yourself, and I want you to be able to actually spend money on the things that are important and meaningful to you. But at some point as well, if you aren't too, I would say, stern or accountable with your finances yet, then it's going to take some practice to build up that muscle of accountability, of discipline, before you can really start focusing on how to use fun money in a budget. And also, no, we're not going over a budget for this episode, but let me know in the comments below if you do want me to do kind of a deep dive into what a potential budget practice would look like, and if there is a budgeting practice that you use currently. So this takes us into our simplified actions, which is the final segment of this show. So these are the ones that I personally took, the simplified actions that kept my finances in check when I was in university, and then continued to work into my daily life when I got my first job and first promotion after university. First things first, calculating monthly income after taxes. Again, everything that's deducted as well, so health insurance and retirement too. And then see what hits my bank account and set aside money first for needs and then for wants. So just sitting down and budgeting itself is not exciting. I know, at least if you're not a weirdo. I say that lovingly. But budgeting itself can be very unexciting. I get that. I do. However, it's the same as when I did my side hustle episode. Linked in the top right corner. You can check that one out too. But you need to put in work up front to make life a little bit easier. When you are setting yourself a game plan and you're able to execute on that game plan, you're going to have a lot more success in not only, again, paying your bills on time, but saving up for a big purchase, saving up for a big experience, as well as having a good understanding of what is coming in and what is going out. Because ultimately, that in of itself is, again, very simple, but hard to execute, is just understanding what that flow of money looks like. The other thing here is that for simple actions, you want to make sure that when you budget realistically. It's not this ideal version of, okay, say you spend $500 a month eating out, and you realize, okay, that is a bit too much. I could save more cooking at home. So my budget is going to be $100 on eating out because that's the type of person I want to be. It doesn't work like that. For some people it does, but on average, you are going to have a much harder time trying to slash out a habit that you may have built up unintentionally throughout university. If you're eating out for almost every single meal and suddenly you think, okay, wow, I need to cut down this $500, a month that I'm spending every single month on food, on fast food, on restaurants, and it's going down to 100 starting tomorrow, starting next week. Because you haven't practiced it yet, because you haven't built that muscle up yet, it's going to be much harder to maintain that type of sudden change, especially when that's not the life you've been leading. That's not the life you're accustomed to. So you want to do a realistic budget that allows you to gradually ease into the changes that you want to see in your life. Maybe it is $500 one month, and then maybe the next month you're aiming to get it down to $400, where that is just cutting out pieces here and there and then learning new skills along the way. Because if you've been eating out for most of your meals, probability is you probably don't know too much about cooking. So that's going to take you a little bit to get into the swing of how to cook, how to meal prep, and what that looks like. But then also that means you do have to keep a good eye on what you spend in other categories too. So budgeting realistically also means that you look back at the past 3-4 months and see what's the average overall that you spent on certain main categories. So housing, transportation, food, entertainment, and savings. I kind of put those in the 5 buckets, but you have to really think about then what does that look like and what is the average, so that way you can budget realistically going forward. And then, of course, automate your reoccurring expenses. I can't stress that part enough. So you get your bills on a certain day, auto pay it. If you get your rent paid on the second day of the month, sweet, keep it on auto pay. Home internet, bills, utilities, auto pay. I'm sure you get the idea. But this makes it easier, just so much easier to keep things out of your to-do list, and an easier record is maintained by ensuring that you are keeping everything paid on time. And you can go back and then see, okay, is there a reason why my utilities went up this month versus why they went down this month? Is it because it's winter and I'm using more heating? Or is it because it is springtime and I don't really need to turn on the heat or the AC? It's just these small little details that are important to understand, especially when you want to have a good grasp of, again, money coming in and money going out. And I want to emphasize here that I didn't talk about credit cards for a reason, because as important as that is for those of us that live here in America to have credit, to build a good credit score, that comes with so much responsibility and self-control. So comment credit card down below if you want me to dive further into that. But Graham Stephan, Andre Jick, Caleb Hammer as well, they have some fantastic videos just in regards to how to manage credit for the first time. If you know you can manage credit well, then it's something to look into. If you know that you have a problem with overspending, it is not something to look into. But again, comment credit card down below if you want to see a video, a dedicated video on what I both think about and recommend you do when trying to build your credit for the first time ever. And again, I know it's important, especially for those of us that live in America, but they are such a double-edged sword if you're not careful with them. And I want to give you guys the best information possible, especially when you're trying to find success in setting up your financial future. So ultimately, this is just focusing on cash in and cash out, because just managing the flow of your money itself gives you such a better understanding of where you are today and puts you above the average person in terms of your financial knowledge and financial understanding. So ultimately, as I said earlier, we do spend more than we think. And so the better we are at understanding what comes in, what goes out, and the better we are at setting personal limits for ourselves, then the more we're going to actually get out of our finances, the more we're going to be able to actually use money and not have money control us instead. But if you can keep a pulse on your income, you can keep realistic budgets, and you set good savings goals and can automate things to the best of your ability, then you'll be in a much better position than 80-90% of the population who kind of just lets money come and go and doesn't like to think about it. Because sure, as I said, finances is stressful. The money topic as a whole for generations in America has been such a taboo subject that it's usually shied away from. But if you actually think about it and you actively engage with it, you will be in a much more knowledgeable position. And that's going to take the stress out of it. That's going to demystify what finances is for you, what personal finances is to you. But I believe in you and that you can make the most of your finances and you can lead a life that is meaningful and intentional while still keeping everything simple in how you go about it. But with that, don't forget to like and subscribe if you watch this on YouTube. If you listen to us on a podcast app of choice, leave us a 5-star rating. That really helps us out so much. And I do honestly greatly appreciate it because it helps grow the show and get it in front of other people just like you. I will see you all in the next episode, keeping everything simple. Have an amazing day, you amazing people, and go out there and do great things. See you next time.